Do you love Halloween and all things scary? Well, stay tuned to see how we make this Nightmare on Elm Street inspired tumbler with water slide and epoxy accents. Hi, I'm Jessica with JC Creative, and I'd like to welcome you to the great Halloween Tumbler playlist. If this is your first time here, I'm so glad you stopped by. If you are a fellow creative who loves DIY projects, anything from tumblers to teas, we have a little bit of everything for everyone, and I would encourage you to subscribe to my channel below and be sure to ring the little bell to make sure you get notifications for all the new tutorials I drop each and every Monday. So last week, I invited you all to join in on the great Halloween Tumbler playlist. So this week, I chose to make a pretty creepy tumbler. I chose Nightmare on Elm Street as my inspiration for my cup. It is a childhood classic of mine. He was one of my favorite horror flicks. So we will be accomplishing this look using water slide, some acrylic paint. We have some three-dimensional epoxy accents here. And some acrylic and some epoxy dye. We'll be using that as well. So if you guys are ready, let's get started. Okay, so for this project, some things we're gonna need is you're gonna need a tumbler of your choice. I'm using a 30-ounce hog tumbler. I'm painted white. You're gonna need a couple of water slide decals. I am gonna be using some Illuminite dye, some red Illuminite dye to dye some of the epoxy later. I am going to need some black acrylic paint, a couple of cups to mix in, some sponges for painting, your epoxy, your gloves, you definitely need your turner. Not a lot here. I'm not going to have any glitter on this cup, so I won't need any glitter. Pretty much your water slides are going to be your main decorations and your paint and stuff. So that is what we need. So we are going to move on to step one. So the first step in making this tumbler is going to be applying the water slides. So when I decided what I was going to do for my Halloween tumbler, I know Halloween is lots of cute elements and stuff to it, but I am a scary movie kind of gal, so I love horror flicks, and I've seen a million It cups, so I wanted to do something different, and I sat down and thought about who really is my favorite out of all of the horror legends, and I would say Freddy was always the one that got me the most. I loved his humor and whatever. So I'm going to make a Freddy cup. So I have cut my water slide into pieces. I've made got two long pieces here, and I've got a big container. This is like 10 by 18 or something. It's actually an old cupcake carrier, but it works perfect. It fits here on my turner, and I use it for my full water slides and some of the smaller ones too. So my water is like tepid, room temperature, a little warm, but not like warm, hot. And I'm going to start with the top edge here. So I cut this along here because of this curve. I'm going to be battling this curve. So this water slide is going to go on in two pieces, and then once it dries, we're going to come back in with the black paint. We're going to get rid of all this white. This cup is going to be black when we're done, but we want to start with white so your images will pop where we need this light color, because this is on a clear water slide. So where we need this lightness and where we need the white of the letters, it's going to come through, and then we're going to cover all of where the white's showing in black. So I'm going to I'm going to move the camera probably a little bit, see if you can see it. Make sure you guys are in a good spot here. I'll move a little closer. Oh, sorry about the fingers. How's that? So you see when you put your water slide in, it automatically curls. Now, I will say the most important part of water slide, if you are struggling, is a good clear coat. So this water slide is coated, if you can see how shiny that is? I have a very thick coated clear on there, and this is what I use. Krylon Color Master Clear. This is indoor, outdoor clear coat. I put 4 cups or 4 layers at least. I do, when I spray, I do this direction, then the other direction, then back at that. And so I do horizontal, vertical, 4 coats, and then I let it dry. So this should be nice and thick. So it's already ready to move. See how that slides off there? So this is called water slide because it's supposed to slide. So you want to get your surface wet, whatever you're putting it on, you get that wet. And then leave it, it's on the paper right now. We are just going to take it and we are going to smooth it. I kind of just slide it off to on one corner, and then I just pull that off. Now, I want to make sure that top edge of white is covered. And if it's not, I'll come back and hit it with some paint later. But I take dampened baby wipes. So I put some, bring out my water here. And that's what I use to smooth my water slides on. So I kind of start in the middle and I work my way out. And when you're working a curved surface, sometimes you're going to get wrinkles and stuff. So you got to just keep it wet and keep working those out. Water slide stretches a little bit. So you'll be able to get most of those out. A little bit of more water. Let's add some water on there. Got a little wrinkle over here, trying to get rid of. And I'm going to blend in all the edges. You're not going to see, when this is done, you're not going to see the edges of this water slide. Right now it's like shocking on the white, but it's all going to be black. So we'll come in here and we're going to paint in here. We're going to fill that in. Excuse me. All right, so there's piece number 1. And here's piece number 2. I just held it down so it didn't curl until the water starts getting it. I'm just going to let that soak there a second. And I just lift it up and test it, move the little edge till it's ready here. So this will take a second or two. Getting there, almost ready. I don't force it. See, now you can see it's starting to come up on these ends here. It just was floating up. I don't know if you saw it, but it was floating there, but it's not ready in the center. That's what I want to make sure of. So I'll kind of scoot it. Now it is. See, it just goes fast. So see how I can move that piece on that piece of paper? That means it's completely ready to slide on. I'm gonna put some more water here, make sure this is good and wet. Forgot to cut that bottom off. Hold on. I messed up, guys. This was supposed to be another piece. I'm just going to cut it real quick and leave it in the water. There we go. It'll hang out there in the water for us. Alright. I'm going to gently kind of pull. It's good and wet here. Trying to pull out most of the wrinkles. I may need to even trim this again to get that wrinkle out. Okay, so on this water slide right here, because of this curve, I should have trimmed this down to even a third or a fourth piece, but I didn't. So I'm taking an X-Acto blade and I'm just running it along this, in between these sets of words, so I can move this piece. There we go. And I can smooth out this one. Then we can smooth out that one. And remember, we're going to come in with some black paint, so we're not all that worried about the white showing through. Just starting to not slide here, so we added some more water. There we go. Water slide just takes, it does take patience. Get it right. And sometimes you have little cracks and imperfections, but for this case, this one, I'm going to come in with black paint and I'm going to fix all that. Any of these white spaces we see, we're going to fill it in with black. Once it dries, you gotta let the, no, we have to let the water side completely dry. Don't try to paint on water. Don't do that. Alright, I'm going to grab this piece that's down in the water and I'm going to cut it before. I messed up. I should have trimmed this before we put it on, but I didn't, so I'm going to try to trim it while it's wet. See, this is what happens when you're making tumblers. Plans change. I didn't measure it right, so it's a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be. So we are going to improvise on my little cup design here. There we go. So this was supposed to be 3 words, so I'm going to put the middle one here. I'm just trimming off the extra black that I don't want. Okay, there's that one. I don't know if you can see down on the table I'm doing. I'm just trimming some of the excess black away. Come here, little guy. One of the corners is like stuck to itself, so I just put it back in the water so I can get it unstuck. And then the last guy here. Now I know I'm using an X-Acto, not attached to a knife and just a blade. Don't do that unless you've got a lot of experience with X-Actos, and I do. Alright. My last word goes over here. So again, it looks a little rough now. However, when we come in here, when this dries and we come in with black paint, you're not even gonna be able to tell that we used water slide versus paint. It's all gonna blend in. Just trust me. Just trust me. So I'm gonna turn this over, roll this over. I'm going to do the back side water slide. I'm gonna fast forward that because it's taken quite a bit of time, but you get the idea how I do it. So I'm gonna do the back side and then we will come back, take a peek, and then we're gonna let it dry and then come back in with paint. Alright, so I have my water slide on, and it looks rough. I know, but we are going to let this dry. I'm not going to rush it. You can, some people heat gun it and speed up the process. I'm not. I'm just going to let my water slide just dry naturally. Then we're going to come back when it's dry, and you will see how much that layer of paint is going to change our design. So we're going to let this dry. We'll come back, and we're going to do some painting. Okay, so I have our tumbler off of the turner, and our water slide is completely dry. So the next step I want to do is I need to fill in all of this white with black. So I'm going to go in with some acrylic paint. I do have a really dark brown alcohol ink in case I might need that to blend in a little bit. So we are going to start painting this tumbler, and I'm going to try to get it at an angle where you guys can see. So hold on one second, let's adjust it and we'll come back. Okay, so I have me a little piece of like scrap paper here. I'm just gonna put me some of my black acrylic paint on there, and this is just Plaid brand black paint, nothing special or spectacular. Acrylic paint does dry pretty quickly, so that's part of the reason I like to use it. I do put my cup on a football and arm just for ease of holding, and it'll make it a little easier for me when I'm showing this to you guys. So I'm gonna dab I use these little cosmetic sponges. We're gonna go in here, and it might take a couple coats to get a good rich black, which is what I want. So I'm just gonna dab our black on. Basically, we are gonna hide the edges of this water slide. You're never gonna know. It's there. And you could use alcohol ink if you want to give that a whirl. They both dry really quickly, so what I got out the brown alcohol ink is for, because I might soften this edge here where the white or black, I'm sorry, is meeting that, like kind of that halo on his image. I'm gonna let that side dry a little bit. I'm gonna kind of rotate over. Well, let's do the bottom and get that covered up. So I might do a layer that'll come back. Oops, sorry. Do a second layer. So you get the point here. So we're gonna go in, I'm gonna blend this all up. So I'm gonna actually fast forward my painting here, so you don't have to watch all that, trying to make these videos a little shorter, and then we'll come back and he should be ready for epoxy. Okay, so I have them all painted and it blended in really, really well. So just fair warning, when you're doing this, it's gonna look like your blacks aren't matching. It's not one's matte, like this black is matte when you put it on, and your water side is gonna be glossy, so it's gonna look like it doesn't match. But as soon as you slap a clear coat on there, which I just did, it comes all together. So you can't really see where my water side started or ended. Looks pretty good. Cup is all black. So I'm going to let this clear coat dry, and then we are going to put some epoxy on it. So I'm going to let this dry, and then we will be back. Okay, our tumbler's all dry, and we are ready to epoxy. So when I do epoxy, I do use Pro Marine. It is a 2-part AB epoxy. So we are going to mix together equal parts of A and B. If you watch my other videos, you know that I like to warm up part A, then I add in part B, I stir until clear, then I put it on the cup. So I am going to actually fast forward the mixing of the epoxy part. Whatever your epoxy is, check your instructions, make sure mixing. If you're using Pro Marine, it's definitely equal parts. So I am going to fast forward the mixing of the epoxy, and I'll be back to show you how I apply it to our cup. Okay, I have my epoxy all mixed up, ready to go. So if you've watched my other tutorials, you know that I kind of do my epoxy in a little two-step process. I put on a thin layer, I torch it with my torch, and then I flood coat the rest. So this is going to be the first coat of epoxy on this cup. I want to make it thick enough because the second coat is actually going to be a coat. We're going to actually add some epoxy details to this, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. But what I like to do is get a real thin coat of epoxy on here. And hopefully I mixed up enough. I normally do a super big batch, but I had already got the cups, as you can hear, behind me turning before I started this piece of the tutorial. So I really don't have anything else right now that needs epoxy. During the course of this video, I will tell you that I have been in the process of moving my studio. I was upstairs in our house taking up 2 of our extra bedrooms, and my husband finally decided that I needed some more space. So part of the basement is now my studio, but it has been a process trying to get all that stuff moved and still keep up with doing the tutorials and all the orders I have to do. So I'm a busy gal this week, but I promised this Halloween tutorial, and it's going to go on our Halloween Tumbler playlist, which is going to be so much fun. I hope several of you guys are making some tumblers you can share with us, because it's going to be fun to have a nice playlist. I love Halloween. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so I've got a nice thin layer on there. So if you're doing this correctly, you shouldn't see any unshiny spots. Everything should be shiny. And if you see any bare spots, you just want to get in there with your finger and rub it in there. You clear coated your graphic, so it's safe. Now I'm going to grab my torch real quick. That's the other thing about moving. You can't find anything. And I'm going to hit it. There we go. Just to pop any air bubbles in this first little layer here. So what this does is primes your cup. And if you actually sit and read the instructions for most epoxies, they tell you to put a thin primer layer of epoxy down. It gives the epoxy something to adhere to. It's self-leveling, so it will level itself, but it just flows better when it has a base coat. So that's why I do this primer layer when I lay my epoxy. So now I have a nice good coat for the rest of my epoxy to pour on, and I do try to pour it in thin bands here, I don't like when a lot hits the board, and if you pour it too fast it will drip off. But I want a good flood coat on this level. So my next layer of epoxy is not going to be a complete layer. So I don't know if you've seen those cutesy little ice cream cone tumblers or the hot chocolate tumblers where you put the epoxy to make, like, you know, chocolate running over the cup or the ice cream's running over the cup. Well, this is Halloween and this is Freddy Krueger, so we are going to use that same method to bloody up our cup a little bit. I want it to be scary and horror filled, and so we are going to add some 3D kind of bloody effects to our cup in this on our next step here. It's going to be like the finishing touches on our tumbler here. So I am going to hit it with my torch one more time because I do see, I don't think you can see them on camera, but there's a bunch of air bubbles here and we're going to pop them. I love watching the air bubbles pop. I don't know why, but it's satisfying. Like Haha, I got you. I'm also going to let this turn for probably, pause or something there. I'll give it 5 or 10 minutes. I'll let it turn. I'll come back, check on it. I might hit it with the torch again if need be. I do pay attention pretty closely when I'm first turning these bad boys to make sure that I don't have any voids or bare spots. Sometimes the epoxy doesn't behave. So if you catch it in the first 15 to 30 minutes, you can apply heat, you can warm up the epoxy, you can still kind of manipulate it. So I will watch it as it's turning because I want this to be completely smooth. It is, I would consider its top coat. And the next epoxy is just going to be for show, really. And you really can see air bubbles on black. So in these black solid areas, they stand out like a sore thumb. So there we have it. We are going to let this baby turn. Then we are going to come back and add some creepy effects to our tumbler. And then this Halloween tumbler will be ready to go to its forever home. So see you in a bit. Okay, so I got Mr. Freddy off the tumbler and he looks awesome. All that paint blended right in. You can't even see the seams on the water side. But he's not done. I want to add some more to him. So I know I mentioned it before, but I want to add some epoxy blood droplets on the rim and edge of my cup. So very similar to the ice cream cups or the hot chocolate cups, except for it's Halloween. We're doing gory and gruesome. So I'm going to add that around the edge of my cup. Maybe a couple strategically placed strips around it. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to mix some epoxy. I'm not going to make you watch me do that. I use, again, Pro Marine, equal parts A and B. I warm up A, add in B, stir till clear. That's pretty much the gist of it. So I'm going to fast forward that part, and then I'll come back and I will we'll mix the color in and get this going. So be back in a sec. Okay, so I have our epoxy all mixed up and ready to go on our tumbler. I'm going to use, to get my blood, I'm going to use Illuminite red dye. I love their epoxy dyes. They do a really good job. So that's what I'm going to use. You can use acrylic paint though as well. That will do the job. I feel like the acrylic paint clumps up on me and stuff, so I tend to use the Illuminite dyes. I'm just going to pour my epoxy in this cup so you guys can see better the color that we're going to add. I do use a reusable silicone cup, so I will wash that out. Okay, so we've got our clear epoxy here. And I'm not going to put a ton. You can always add more, you just can't take it away. Okay, so just those 4 little drops. I mean, look at the color. I hope that this shows up against the black. It may not get the effect that I'm really hoping for, but we're going to give it a whirl. And if it doesn't, then, oh, lesson learned, right? So this is super thin. So in order to get the like kind of flow on the top of the cup, you want it to flow, but you don't want it to completely run. So I'm probably going to let this just sit up a minute or two just to let it thicken up. Just so I don't really want it to run all the way down my cup. I really want it to kind of stick to the edge a little bit. So I'm going to let this sit up and then, or set up, I'm sorry. I'm going to clean up my little tools here and then we'll come back and we'll put this on the cup. Okay, so I changed the angle a bit here, trying to hope that you guys can see as it runs down the cup. At least I'm going to try, hopefully. So when I do have a backup plan, if this red doesn't show up on here, I might have a little backup idea that might make it work. So I've got a couple little tools here. I've got one of these little droppers, I've got a little stick, I got a popsicle stick, and then I've got like a, you know, our little medicine ones. And I'm not sure which one's going to work the best. So I'm going to try the little medicine guy first. I'm just going to take a little bit of epoxy up in there. Just a little. I'm not going to do a lot. Got my handy dandy baby wipe here. And I'm just going to take here. I'm going to see what happens. So it's definitely the right flow, but it's not going to show up on my cup. So I'm going to wipe that off real quick with my baby wipe. No harm, no foul. I'm going to dry it off. We're going to give it something to let it show. So I'm going to take a little bit of my white acrylic paint. So this is me totally improvising on the fly, guys, because I was sitting here thinking, like, I just don't think it's going to show up, and I want it to show up. So I'm just going to paint in some, oh, you can't see. We got, I'm going to just give me a little bit of a white base. Okay, now just follow with me here. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just gonna give it, let's just do those two. Let's just test this out since we're kind of doing this together here. Get my heat gun. All right, so let's take the heat gun. Let's just make sure this is real dry real quick. And all the while our epoxy's hardening, so I gotta kind of work fast. Let's see what happens here. This may be a total fail, but if so, we failed together. So now let's try and run some of our blood down there. Yeah, baby. So I'm not pushing any more out. I pushed some on the side here. I'm gonna kind of guide it down our little thing. And make sure I have all of the white covered. And that might continue to flow down the cup, which that's all good. It can do that. I'm okay with that. I'm totally okay with that. Might take a little bit off. There we go. What do you think? What do you think? All right, let's do this one. I'm going to use a little bit less this time because that one. Just make sure to get the top edge. Anywhere you have that white, just make sure all the white's covered. Oh, that looks really cool. I like it. I like it. I like it. So I'm going to go jump back to my little paintbrush. I'm going to just do a few little blips in here. A little droplet. don't want it running too far down. I don't want to get my fingers caught in it. And now add some up in here. Maybe a droplet in there. I'm playing with the epoxy, trying to not let it go too far down the cup. And I'm not sure how everybody else does these, like flowing ones or whatever. Honestly, this is the first one I've done, and I'm using blood, not chocolate or ice cream, so a little different, I guess. But I think it'll look pretty cool. Let's put a drop in here. I'll do one close to the bottom once we get a few of these on. I want to make sure I don't put my fingers in them. All right, let's hit these with the heat gun. Make sure it doesn't dry. Acrylic paint dries pretty fast, so it should be good. And then let's go and put our epoxy on. No, I'm not squeezing it. I've squeezed the initial amount out. And now we'll just let it flow. I'll just help it if it needs help, kind of moving the cup back and forth. There we go. See? I'm just making sure all the white's covered up. Like here, I don't like how far this has gone over. I want to just take my baby wipe and back that off. Since it hasn't set up yet, I can take it off of there. Because it was twisting, because I was twisting. All right, now I'm going to sit it down, I guess, trying to get these other ones. Can you still see? Yeah, okay, cool. Oh, of course I'm out, right at the end. Let's get a little bit more there so I can finish this strip off. Ooh. I think I got them all. I don't know. We'll see, guys. This will be a test together. See how this turns out. I think it looks pretty cool. I guess we'll know more after it dries. See if I totally failed and ruined my Freddy cup. But I don't think so. So far, so good. I didn't put any over him because I don't want it covering him up. But I did think it would make a cool accent on the rest of the cup. So I think it looks pretty neat. We'll see how it dries. And this cup, honestly, I'll just need to clean up our edges, and this one will be done because I already did a nice thick top coat. So this is just extra. So I think it turned out pretty good. So I'm going to let this sit and dry, and we will come back in the morning and see how it looks. So here's our finished tumbler. I love the way it turned out. So after I stopped the last video, I did come down to check on it, and I wasn't in love with how the like blood runs were going. So I did take a little bit of the red epoxy we had mixed, and I put a little bit of white acrylic paint in there to kind of make it a little more opaque. And I went in and I added a little bit more. Then I babysat it until it ran down as far as I wanted it to run, and then I flipped it over. And so I actually dried it like this versus the rundown. I wanted the runs to stop where I had them. I didn't want them to keep going. So then I flipped it like this and dried it. So full disclosure, I did mess with it just a little bit after I hung up with you guys, but I didn't have my phone down here when I came down, and I needed to work fast because the epoxy was drying. But it did turn out really good. You can definitely see all of the blood lines running down. I was able to keep it from getting into my wording, so it turned out really, really good. So, but I want to know what you think. Do you guys think this was a fun project that you would do it yourself? This method of the water slide, if you have a white cup and you print your water slide and just make sure it has a background to match whatever you're going to paint the rest of the cup, you really can use this method for all kinds of features to get it appears that we have a cup that's fully wrapped, but really we have a cup that's put together in pieces of water slide, but then we blend that background all together. So the key is making your graphics with a background that you can match with your paint, and black and white are easy to do. So I want to see your cups. So this is the first video that's going to be on the Great Halloween Tumbler playlist. If you made a Halloween cup with us this week, I want you to add your tumbler to the playlist. If you're not on YouTube, I want you to hashtag the Great Halloween Tumbler, and so we can, if we search those hashtags on Facebook or Instagram, we'll get to see your favorite Halloween cups. And if you're gonna make a Halloween cup, make it, video it, and throw it on the list, because we all want to share and see what each other has done. If you want to know all the supplies I use, what water slides, paints, dyes, all that, you can follow the link below. I have a link that goes to my website that shows you all of the supplies. And if you have any questions, want to talk, there's a link to my Facebook group below too, so click on that, jump over to there, and I would love to have you. So until next week, I'll see you next Monday.